This episode of Around the Layout is brought to you by Spring Creek Model Trains. Family owned for nearly 25 years, Spring Creek is your destination for model trains. Check out springcreekmodeltrains.com for a wide variety of offerings from today's top manufacturers and exclusive products found nowhere else. Whether in Deschler, Nebraska, or at a train show near you, stop in and say wow. To see where they'll be next, visit their website at springcreekmodeltrains.com. From trackside to roadside and wherever you'd see a sign, Scale Signs has it all. With over 1,400 offerings in N, HO, S, and O scale, Scale Signs has the largest collection of fine scale signs on the planet. Come see the details that bring your models to life on their website, scalesigns.com. Attention railroad fans! 1810 Designs is here to enhance the hobby with handcrafted works of art made just for you. From classic locomotive railheads to custom logos for your railroad, or maybe just good old railroad signs, they bring the spirit of the rails into your home, office, or train room. Visit 1810designs.com today and bring the railroad home. That's 18ten designs.com. ATLP Extra is our monthly newsletter delivered right to your inbox each month. Sign up for free at atlpextra.com. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Around the Layout, where model railroaders come to tell their story. My name is Ray Arnott, so glad you could join us. Tonight, we're going to be talking about going down the rabbit hole in the whole world behind super detailing, and nobody better to do that with than Dr. Mini himself, Bernard Hellen. Bernard, good to see you, my friend.
Good evening, Ray. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm looking forward to a chat with you about this miniature, super detailed world that you've got yourself involved in with mini prints, and it's just it seems almost endless.
Do you know that we turned 5 years old in 2 weeks?
Well, congratulations. That's awesome. 5 years in, and the stuff you've covered, and yet there's still so much more, because it's just as big as the world is, so is the miniature world, right?
And the miniature world has never, ever been more exciting. I mean, we are literally at the stage where pretty much anything is possible. I mean, if it exists in the real world, I'm pretty sure that we can make it in the miniature world.
Well, that'll certainly keep your roster of 3D printers going, because there's lots and lots and stuff to do. But tonight we're going to explore the why behind super detailing. I can't wait to get into that, the mentality behind super detailing, the thought process behind it. And I know you've got quite a bit on that, so looking forward to diving down with it.
You sure you want to go down that rabbit hole? Because once you go down that rabbit hole, it's hard to get back out.
Well, what I'll do is I'll tie a rope around myself, and I'll kind of tie it off to a tree so that if it gets too bad, I can just pull myself back up out of it. But no, I think it's a lot of fun, and I think it's things that we all do as modelers. We get into that really, into it deep. So here we go.
Excellent. Well, you know that the phrase "going down the rabbit hole" really comes from Lewis Carroll's classic Alice in Wonderland, which was written around 150 years ago. And today the phrase really means, becoming deeply immersed, almost obsessed in a subject, and spending more time than you expected. And if you're anything like me, an hour in the layout room can certainly become an evening. And I'm just having so much fun creating all these little tiny model railroad details to my layout and for other layouts. So I started to think about it, and I started to say, well, why do we add these details to model railroad layouts? So, I was just sort of pondering it, and I asked the internet. I went to the Mini Prints Modelers Facebook group. This was probably about 2 years ago. And I asked my customers, I said, why do you add details, super detailing, which is, my definition of it is, adding a ridiculous amount of realistic details to try and create a realistic world. Why do you do it? So what I want to share tonight is really an exploration of what people told me through this line of questioning. It started out as a Facebook group question on Mini Prince Modelers. It became an NMRA presentation that I've delivered a few times, live and on the internet. And now its latest version is a series of blog posts on miniprints.com. And that's sort of what we're going to cover tonight.
Excellent. Looking forward to that.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm going to break it down tonight into 7 sort of broad topics that and once again, these are the things that, came out of our conversations. So we're going to talk a little bit about storytelling. We're going to talk about making it believable and believability, things that connect to the audience, expressing your own personal creativity, challenging yourself and improving your modeling skill, realism, of course. And then I think the one that makes it sort of really come home to me is personal satisfaction. So that those are sort of the broad themes that we're going to get into, and I'll share with you some of the information that I think I found interesting anyway.
Well, excellent. Looking forward to getting into this. And if folks want to listen to this and then also read along and look at the images, Bernard mentioned miniprints.com, and we'll also provide links on our website aroundthelayout.com/153. So take away, Bernard.
Is that us? Episode 153?
153. Yes,
Ooh,
sir.
That's my lucky number. Excellent.
There you go. Awesome. Awesome. Planned it all out. Just perfect.
There you go. So chapter one in the story of super detailing is really the power of model railroad storytelling. So Tim T.C. Adams, who's a member of this group I mentioned, the Mini Prince Modelers Facebook group, said, and this is, I'm going to quote some of the customers and some of the things that people said in the Facebook groups. This is his words: "Not scenes for me, but stories. Signs on buildings and elsewhere are like credits in a movie. Details, figures, animals. The other things are the actors who tell the stories and depict the themes." And I think, many modelers share this view. You always talk about sort of, the trains. The trains are the actors. But then we start talking about, all of the information around that. And a lot of the modelers that I've talked to, they see their layouts as more than just tracks and trains. You've certainly got the Plywood Pacific, and the people that are, we've all seen the layouts that are, very much operations focused, and all that matters is that there's a track and a cutout of a cardboard building that represents some sort of industry. But there is a group of modelers that see their layouts as more than just tracks and trains, and for them, every scene tells a story.
And again, going into that idea, that storytelling concept, we've been talking about that quite a bit here on the podcast. People are compelled to stories. We see them all the time. We read books, we watch movies, we watch television shows. There's a human nature draw to a great story.
And it's interesting too, because as we peel the onion, and we start to talk about it, a lot of the stories that people tell are to commemorate things in their lives. I've had people say, this scene on my layout is, me and my dad fishing, at our favorite fishing hole, because that's something we used to do. Or, this is the first car that I drove. So, I've got to pick the car of your choice. So a lot of the model railroad storytelling that I've seen lately have been, to commemorate a time or a place, or to remember something that's important to the modeler.
Right.
And I think that's fascinating. I think that's a lot of fun too.
Yeah.
To be able to, honor someone or remember something on a layout that brought you joy.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a lot of that. And we've heard so many and seen so many layouts do that, and, or tribute scenes and all that. It's just, it does. And it's always fun when somebody comes over to be able to use that as the tool to even vocally tell that story.
And it's great for kids too. I mean, it makes it a lot of fun. If you've got an eagle going after a snake, Or I was at one layout where it got really whimsical, and we'll talk more about creativity in a couple of chapters. But what about a submarine rising through the middle of the lake and lots of little sort of penguins on top of the submarine? I mean, this isn't rivet counting, certainly. Well, it could be if the submarine is prototypical, but it's a lot of fun. So we'll get into that when we talk more about creativity. But storytelling is probably, I think, one of the most powerful ways that I've seen people add details to layouts. And as you say, it's a lot of fun. I mean, I have pictures up on these blog posts of someone who created a scene where they had a fisherman fishing, and then they put a bunch of the Mini Prince river otters hanging out behind the fisherman, and you can just see what they're thinking. Or a front yard filled with garden gnomes, a mounted deer, and various pets. These small details just add layers to the story, and I think at the end of the day, it makes it more immersive, and it makes it more believable.
Yeah, be able to get lost within a layout is certainly a lot of fun. Like you said, that immersion.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, Ray Persing, who's another brilliant modeler, says, what draws people, not necessarily model railroaders, but just people into a scene is the inclusion of people and critters, things that we can admire. We can admire the craftsmanship of a very well detailed alleyway, but then what draws you in, maybe is a couple making out, or a deal gone bad, or a cop making an arrest, or someone putting out the trash, or dogs or cats, or pigeons. These figures tell the story and pull us into the scene, rather than just sort of glancing at a train going by.
It's funny that you say, making out and to a couple making out, and then you go to taking out the trash. there's a wide range there, but yeah, and I think it's kind of that that appeal of interesting, right? That what's going on here, and that curiosity of seeing those type things.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I mean, and I find it fun. I mean, I love building these little things. It just. I think the other thing too for me, and we'll get more into this when we talk about realism, is the world is not necessarily a clean and orderly place. There is lots of chaos,
Mm.
out in the world. And if you are a true rivet counter and you want your layout to be like the real world, then there's a lot of distraction in the real world, clutter, details, whatever you want to call it, that we can definitely bring into our layouts. So, in conclusion, I think, for this part, stories definitely bring our layouts to life. It turns a layout from a display into more of an experience,
Right.
which is fun. The other thing that details can do is they can make your layout more believable, and they can definitely help to anchor your layout in time and place. I just had Tom Johnson join me on Tuesday at a 3D printing roundtable that I hosted on the wonderful NERX Northeast region online show. I know you were very much involved in that.
They did an excellent job. NERX, their virtual convention, as you mentioned, and your presentation was very interesting. And as you talk about that, we'll also share the link to that on our website, aroundthelayout.com/153.
Well, I don't think there's anyone better in the hobby than Tom Johnson. He is, as you know, a retired art teacher. And if you want to talk about using 3D printed or model railroad details to really anchor your model railroad layout in a time and space and to set the scene, I mean, he gave some fantastic examples, in terms of the era. He talked about the service stations, the signage, the setting could be, time of year or the year, or, it's not just, date, time, month, year. It can be, New England versus Rocky Mountains. There's a whole bunch of things that these super detailing, these little details can do as we saw in Tom Johnson's presentation, that can really say, oh, I get it. I'm October, New England, 1974.
Yeah, it's that transformation, right? It picks you up and takes you there.
Absolutely. Is it a New England wharf scene? If you want to make it authentic, you're going to have a lot of seagulls on your layout. Is it, mountain goats in canyons? These are the types of things that really make the viewer believe in the reality of what you're modeling. I love modelers that take photographs of their layout and then you're like, you do that double take and you're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
And I'm sure, we've all seen the pictures that for like that brief moment, you're like, is it real or is that a model?
That is definitely the pinnacle, right? That is when you've accomplished that, or if you fooled somebody into thinking or second guessing it, boy, you've really hit a level. And Tom Johnson is one of those guys that can make that happen.
And every now and then someone posts a picture, on one of the modeling groups on Facebook or the Mini Prints Modelers group, and I'm just like, you just shake your head and it's like, it's just perfect. It's just, maybe there's, you know that it's a model because they posted it in a modeling group, but that's really the only thing that gave it away.
Right.
So setting the scene, making it believable, if there are no smaller details, you're just playing trains. This is a quote from Ken Bergen. He says, if I bothered to add details, then I'm actually modeling a slice of reality. And I love that. I absolutely love, making it immersive, making it believable, paying attention to those small details that define the time and space. We're in the golden era. 5-10 years ago, everyone had the same, Walthers or Woodland Scenics figures, on their layout. I mean, you had a limited palette of details that could be added to your layout. If you were really talented, you got the plasticine out, and, made your own little clay blob of something. But I don't think there's ever been a time where there is the ability to add so many individual, all customized personal details to a model railroad layout. I mean, I say if you can dream it, you can do it. If you can imagine it, if it exists in the real world, there's probably some 3D manufacturer that has made it.
I think of this, and when you talk about why in all these details and how it pulls you in, and I use the term quite a bit on the show, simulation, right? We're simulating what the real world does with the trains. And when you add all these details, kind of in comparison, if you go to a mediocre computer simulator of a flight simulator or a train simulator, and you get in some rough details, but when you get those really crisp, sharp details, now you can really feel like you're simulating the entire thing, and it seems like this is what really pulls into that as well.
And there are lots of different ways of enjoying this hobby. I mean, I have a basement sized layout in a room that's 30 feet by 10 feet, and it's a double deck, and it's more layout than I should have ever built. And it's actually sadly about to be ripped out for the 19-year-old who wants to go live in the basement. But I also have the 2 foot by 4 foot modules. And I think that the super detailing and all of the things we've talked about the storytelling and making it believable, and the next thing we're going to talk about connecting to the audience, I'm having more fun spending more time going deeper on a smaller module than I ever did creating the basement size empire. And I think that's one of the things, as people tend to have less space, less time, less money. I'm certainly seeing the rise of N scale and the rise of modules. And certainly some of the greatest modeling I've seen lately have not necessarily been basement empires, but have been shelf layouts and modules. And this whole notion of adding details and super detailing really fits in quite nicely with having a smaller space, less real estate, but doing more with it, and really spending time photographing it, and sharing all of these little stories and scenes. Some of the layouts that I really truly admire, I've been shocked when I've seen an overview photograph of them, because some of them are just a tiny little shelf.
And we just covered this on our last interview with Thomas Kolmoski when we were talking about building the right size layout. And again, another point for smaller layouts is exactly that. You talk about that word achievable, and what do you want to achieve? And if you want to achieve this super detailed level, that smaller layout, back again to Tom Johnson. Tom Johnson has a very small footprint, but because of that, and because he's not worried about maintaining a massive railroad or even trying to complete that, now he has the time and the energy to really dive deep.
And diving deep touches on our third point, which is connecting to your audience, because one of the most rewarding elements of adding these details, I think, is the ability to engage viewers and create that deep connection. By adding all of these subtle details and doing the things that we've talked about, the storytelling and the making it believable, the result of that is it encourages people to explore and engage with the scenes that you create on a much deeper level. So, these small touches make a huge impact in creating a connection between you, your layout, and the viewer who is interacting with it. And you don't need to create a layout for other people. There are a lot of people, I'm sure, that have never published a picture of their layout, and that's fine. These are not how-tos or what you should do's or anything along those lines. These are some of the things that sort of turn me on, and some of the things that I really like about seeing other people's layouts. You create this believable scene, and you've added life to the scene. Your scene comes alive and creates that memorable connection with the audience and engages them. I think that's wonderful. It can have such an impact.
Yeah, I think the key is, as you were saying, you're not building your layout and you're not doing all this super detailing for everybody else. You're doing it for you. And you can also be doing it so that you can have a platform to tell your story to others. That's where it's about you. And then I think that really helps drive that why, when it's not about impressing the next person, it's being able to tell your story to others.
And I think what it is you're sharing your art. I mean, because this to me, I mean, I've always felt that there are lots of reasons to build a layout and to play trains. And I love operations, and I've operated before, and I'd love to do more of it. But I kind of have always viewed the playing trains slash model railroad layout as an artistic endeavor, a way to express something that I want to make. So I mean, it to me, it's painting a picture and posting it on the fridge, and enjoying the creativity, which we'll talk about next, of creating that work of art, and then sharing the work of art, because obviously it's something that you're proud of and something that you want to show other people and share.
Yeah, I think you're right there. And I think it's, the sharing your art, and then in sharing your interpretation of the world. We
Yeah.
all see the world differently. You see it differently than I do and everybody else. And now you get to share your vision with everybody else in the art that you've created that is your layout.
Which is really satisfying as the person sharing it. But I mean, think of all the layouts that you have been blessed, hashtag blessed, to see, and how
Yeah.
wonderful it is when someone shares their work. I mean, I get such joy out of seeing, and we'll pick on Tom again, the most recent example, because I'm thinking about the presentation from Tuesday, but there are other people out there who are also wonderful. But just thinking about how much joy and pleasure, and there are a few layouts that I have paid homage to on my own, because you see something and you're like, oh, I want to do that, and it's not necessarily copying it. It's like someone has modeled a beaver lodge on their layout, you then go, oh, that's a great idea. I want to have a beaver lodge on my layout, you
Right.
know? So you draw inspiration,
Absolutely.
and that's fun. Something you might have never ever considered doing is like, oh, that's great. Now you're not going to do it the same, but I love, oh, that's neat. And then someone might inspire you. I think that's the word, inspire you to try something or do something.
Or taking all of these different folks like the Tom Johnsons and Neil Schofields and yeah, but just these amazing amount Marty McGurk's, and you take all of what they've done and you kind of create your own out of the three, out of all of that influence. Then through all that becomes your own artistic expression as you develop that of your own creation.
And it's great too because, and I agree 100%. If you looked at the model railroad press for a certain period of time, there were a lot of layouts that looked a certain way. And then with the rise of social media, you start to see, well, there are other sort of trends or movements like, the less is more, or the big, empty fields. I mean, I love, it's ironic and it's going to sound like a contradiction, but I love empty spaces that are filled with things. And I know it doesn't make sense, but you can pack a lot of detail into a really empty scene. Like you can have a beautiful field that has like a pheasant rising out of it or something like that. So, I love sort of sparse, but then adding appropriate little details, in the scenes to once again, make them believable. Like there's a great example on the blog post about subtle details where someone had an old abandoned caboose, very simple scene, an old abandoned caboose, but they added some squirrels playing on top of it. And I thought that was
Yeah,
just
it's great.
delightful. It's just something that, you might not see right away, but if you linger, you just like, oh, that's kind of clever. Very,
Yeah.
very fun.
And fun for all ages to find it, from young kids looking at the layout all the way up through the much older that, yeah, just have a lot of fun finding those little things.
Absolutely, which segues really nicely into our next sort of topic, which is creativity. Because I mean, this is really it. And I mean, creativity, I will talk about the word creativity, but also talk about the word fun.
Mm.
Because if you know anything about me, and if you've ever seen mini prints before, when I talk about unleashing creativity in model railroading, I'm talking about adding some crazy details because I like things that allow, that are whimsical, that are imaginative, where you can inject your personality and your uniqueness into your layout. It doesn't mean that it can't be, some of the most prototypical, brilliant, realistic layouts I've ever seen. And I think of John Parker's layout just outside of Denver, one of the most fantastic, realistic layouts I've ever had the pleasure of seeing in person. He has some fantastically creative and fun scenes of, people sleeping in cars, and, railway police that have to inspect cars as they go through a certain area to make sure there's nobody, napping in. There's a real sort of whimsical, fun, imaginative, creative element in what is a very realistic prototypical layout.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
So it's not either or. I mean, if you put a UFO or an alien or a Bigfoot in the corner of your layout, it can still be, a top-notch quality, brilliant top 10 layout. And I think one of the greatest joys in super detailing, which is, really what we're talking about, a scene, is the creative freedom that it offers. Sometimes after spending hours on a technical task like wiring or track laying or ballasting, or for me, the worst in the world is electrical. I can't stand that. It's really fun to dive into something a little bit more fun and imaginative, and, letting your silliness or your whimsical nature comes out. I mean, Dave Cruzwick, who's a member of the Mini Prints community and who's a wonderful modeler, shared a scene with a graveyard, and it complete with ravens just perched on top of the tombstones, and that eerie atmosphere just, really made the scene beautifully.
Kind of ties in with the thought of the Easter egg, like
Yeah.
that hidden thing, or that thing that as a layout owner you create and you just wonder who's going to notice it. It has a meaning to you and you're just waiting for them to pick up on it and ask that question. So there's a lot of fun just in that.
And it makes it more personal. Your layout becomes your personality and interest. I love metal detecting. It's a sort of my side hobby. Not that I ever get any time to do it, but I keep telling myself that spring has come, the ground is getting softer, and I will take the metal detector out, and you never find anything, but that doesn't matter. It's fun, right?
Right, right.
So I made a metal detectorist, and I have the detectorist on my layout, or me flying the drone. These are the little bits of personality that you can add to the layout just because you can, because it's fun.
Absolutely.
It's enjoyable.
Yeah, and that's exactly that. It's remembering that word. That's what we're all here for. Sometimes we get serious, we get really laser focused on getting the prototype right or getting operations right or getting whatever, but ultimately in the end, the fun and making sure you're injecting fun back into what you're doing.
Absolutely. And I mean, if you want to talk about how to get the next generation involved too. I mean, don't get me wrong. I can Well, I'm not a rivet counter. I don't want to be a rivet counter, but I am a prototypical modeler. So the Quebec Gatineau runs from Montreal to Quebec City. The industries I have on my layout are the industries. They might be a kilometer or two in the wrong direction, but yes, I do want. I'm OCD enough that I want the right things in the right places, but I'm not rigid enough that I can't then throw, Bigfoot walking behind one of them.
Right.
I don't see that as a contradiction
Yeah.
personally. So
Right.
so creativity onwards. I guess in conclusion, let your imagination run wild and see where it takes you. One of the things that I think really hit home when I was watching Tom Johnson, and there's a fantastic picture that he shared of his shell station, and he's got the leaves in the gutters, which
Right.
I just thought, it's like I've never seen that before. This to me is like next level, right?
Yeah. This is I don't even know. It's just absolutely amazing and the eye that he has for things. And we interviewed Tom Johnson. We'll put a link to that show in our show notes again around the layout.com/153. But we talked about people seeing the world differently. Tom Johnson not only sees it, he can lay it out in a way he's gonna make you think this is real. This is not a model. This is him. This is an old prototype photo, and he's nailing it.
And this brings me to sort of my fifth chapter in the exploration of why we are drawn to adding details. And we've talked about storytelling and making it believable and connecting your layout to the audience and expressing your own personal creativity. But I also view it very much as a skill and a challenge. And I think that I'm always trying to become a better modeler. And by sort of looking at a scene, and I find one of the best ways of looking at a scene on your model railroad layout is to take your camera out and photograph it. And I don't know about, most phones now have, built-in macro lenses, and I've got an iPhone, I don't know what it is, 15 or something. And the ability to get within an inch, these cameras are on the cell phones are really all you
Very
need.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
they're all you need. You don't need any third-party apps or DSLRs. I mean, if you have them, great, but grab the cell phone, take a picture of a scene on your layout and look at it because the camera never lies. And every time you look at it, I will argue that you will see an opportunity to
Right.
change something, an opportunity to kick it up to a higher level of skill and attention to detail. If you want to, and I happen to want to. This is, adding layers of depth and realism. There's always an opportunity to sprinkle a leaf. Chris Ward, a really talented modeler, said, it's much like when you draw a picture. There are levels of detail and depth that you can put into a picture. You can draw a stick man. You can make him 2D or 3D by adding shading, colors, layers, highlights. These are just another level of detail that you add to this, what I think is artwork that we're creating.
This kind of ties into a past conversation we had with Lance Minheim, and we talked a bit about the idea of learning to see. And you talk about layers, and not only learning to see your layout, but learning to see the world as the prototype and seeing beyond just the surface, just the obvious, and seeing that depth and layer. And then once you learn how to see it, then being able to convey it back to your layout.
I love that idea. I think you've nailed it, Ray. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because I walk 1 kilometer. I don't know what that is in miles, but it's 15-minute walk every day from the home to Miniature Printerland, the office. And I walk through a kind of gritty industrial area, which turns me on, because along the walk are all the inspirations for the things I've added. So, on my walk, I see bins and pallets and skid steers and, all sorts of cranes and lots of industrial details. And every time I do this walk, I'm noticing, another little sort of realistic detail that could get added to the Mini Prints catalog. And it's really walking through the world, pretending the world was your layout, and seeing, oh yeah, that would be cool. That's interesting.
It's like a 2-kilometer business trip, isn't it? R&D business trip for
Yeah,
mini prints.
exactly, exactly. Every day I walk to work is R&D, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, that's interesting. It's always just sort of looking around, and I'll go back to the fact that I do say, the world is a lot messier and more chaotic and interesting than the average layout. Someone said, and this was early on in the mini prints evolution, somebody was talking about birds. Why are there no birds on layouts? There are birds everywhere. I mean, you can't go outside without seeing a bird.
Right.
And most layouts don't have birds on them.
Yeah. Why are we admitting them? Yeah, we should be. Yeah, that should be included, right?
Yeah. I mean, even if it's just, a single, telephone line, with just, little tiny black specks on them, little starlings or something. If it exists in the real world, I think it's fair game for our layout.
Absolutely.
And so this is the whole notion of skill and challenge. And I, for one, really do enjoy the challenge of adding these things. Dan Pugach, another super talented modeler, shared on this Facebook group, super detailing, today's subject, is what makes his layout believable. He says he personally spends more time and money on detail parts than he does on structures and trains. And he likes to look at a layout or diorama as if he was looking, as we said, through a camera lens. He used to be an urban photographer, spent most of his time photographing alleyways and staircases, and said you always see pigeons, newspapers, rats, all the things that we were talking about. So it's interesting to photograph the real world and then photograph our layout and compare and contrast and see, what are the opportunities that we can add in to the layout. And I mean, why does it matter? It doesn't. It's just about pushing yourself to go beyond the basics. If you want to try and create something personal and truly extraordinary, and challenging yourself to improve your skills as a modeler by creating these scenes that are more realistic, engaging, and artistically impressive. And it's one element of the hobby that may appeal to some people. It's certainly what I enjoy doing.
I think what it also does for the folks that do have smaller layouts, we joke on the show that a layout never seems to be 100% done. It always hits 99.9%, and that's it. You never get to that 100% until the Sawzall comes out. I think what that super detailing also allows you to do is to be able to continue on and continue to develop these new skills, or be able to use them, because through the process of building this layout, you've learned so much. And if you call it done, all those skills now go dormant. But now you can take these skills and be able to apply them in that super detailing aspect.
And it's kind of like treating your layout or your module as a whole bunch of little dioramas. You're creating something and you're experimenting. I know I've done that with water. You pour, you might have 3 rivers on your layout, and you can definitely see the artistic progression, from the first river you created to the second river you created to, the third one. And, by the time you get to your third one, they're probably, like fish embedded and, the layers of epoxy, and, you're sort of constantly evolving your technique.
And as it comes out so good, you're going back to the number one and you're like, let's tear this out and let's do it again because I've gotten
And
good
that's
at this.
fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some people do that. I mean, back to Tom, he changed his entire layout from, I think, a summer to a fall theme.
Yeah.
So there are people that also, will be like, oh, I was 1974 and now I'm 1980. And they just, update their layout. I've never had the guts to do it because, that sort of practical side of me said, you can't do it. But I've always thought it would be really interesting to have a portion of the layout set in spring, then go to summer, then go to fall, and then go to winter. And having, 4 distinct seasons as the train passes through, almost like 4 modules or 4 dioramas. Because I've always been inspired by, I think his name is Mike Onfalone. Mike, I don't know if you know
The
that name.
Allagash?
Yes,
Yep,
and the
there
mud
you go.
season.
Yes.
I've always wanted to model mud season because it's just the way he's got that, the half melted snow and, the muddy puddles, and, every layout seems to be, a bright summer day. Everyone is sort of like July or August or maybe fall, but just to sort of, do a winter scene or a, a muddy, like right now, a muddy March scene.
Yeah, where everything's sloppy and it's stuff that's it's different. It's the out of the ordinary, right? That really makes it extraordinary.
And it's that skill and challenge. It's just the notion of like, it would be fun to try that. You get when you're building a basement layout and you've set it in July, unless you're doing a diorama for a presentation, when do you get to model mud?
Not very often, no.
So
Yeah.
I just think it would be fun to try it because you see something like that and you get inspired and it's like, oh, that's really well done. It would be fun to try something like that.
Absolutely.
I don't think I'd ever have the, I think it would be too chaotic, but it would be fun to do. Maybe actually what would be really fun would be to do the same module in the same location in 4 seasons. So have 4 modules all executed spring, summer, winter, fall.
And see how precise you can keep things, but yet have the season change around it. That would certainly be a challenge.
Now, remember how we talked about going down the rabbit hole?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is going
Yeah,
down
that might be. Yeah, that could be. That could be a very deep rabbit hole for you.
And that brings us, I guess, to our 6th point. So we talked about the skill and the challenge. And point number 6, and there's only 2 points left. So point number 6 is realism, and we talked about the accurate and prototypical modelers. And I guess, if it's legit that there are people out there that, get really excited about how many, pop rivets are on a boiler, or, how many ties are spaced to the square inch or the square foot or whatever, then yeah, I guess we can also talk about the importance of realism when it comes to detailing a scene, whether it's an eagle's nest built into a rocky outcrop, complete with eggs, or an eagle going after a bunny rabbit, or a cluttered environment. Why not be a rivet counter when it comes to scenic details? That's, I think, equally fun and legit in my book anyway. There's one modeler who, and he got my admiration forever. He bought I do a little bass trophy mount and some antlers that you can, put on like a trophy wall. And he modeled them and put them on the inside of a building, did a photograph of the inside of the building and then closed the building up. And I said, like, why? Like, you can't see through the window. You don't know it's there. He said, oh, I know it's there. Like he did it because
Yeah,
he
he knows
could.
it's there.
He knows it's there. Like his building
Yeah.
is perfectly detailed on the inside. Yeah, I suppose he could always take the lid off, the roof off, but he did it because he could. And I'm like, okay, my hat is off to you, sir. That is a new level of fantastic detailing that certainly earns respect.
More of a case to the point, though, that it's about you, what you want to do, and that's 100% for him, because
Yeah.
nobody else will ever really know unless he tells
No,
them. Yeah.
no, and that's just it. I mean, there is no right and wrong, and I mean, that's my pet peeve. The thing that I dislike is when people say, this is the way, and it's by no means is any of this ever meant to be that. There are so many different ways to approach this hobby, which makes it so much fun. What I'm simply sharing here is, I guess, what turns me on, and then some of the comments and some of the explorations that others have shared with me, other people that enjoy going down the rabbit hole.
Yeah. Thousands of doors into our hobby for sure.
And then finally, and I guess this is the last point, and it can expand, and there are a few more that people have shared with me after I've done these presentations, and I'm sure after this show, that you will get mail and ideas of people saying what turns them on about adding details. But this whole notion of just personal satisfaction, which we've talked a little bit about, but just the personal joy, like our friend who added a fully detailed interior of a building for his own enjoyment. Add your own personal touches to your layouts. Create scenes that commemorate people, that reflect your personality and your interests, like metal detecting. This is a chance to truly make your layout your own. Even if the details are not obvious to others, you can get such an incredible sense of satisfaction. There are all sorts of different types of modelers. Those who like to watch your trains go around, those who could care less about what it looks like as long as they're having fun doing their operations, and then those who want everything to look like it belongs in a museum. And there's no right or wrong answer. There's every degree of along that spectrum.
It's that personal joy that you talk about that keeps the flywheel turning. We talk
Yes.
about the flywheel, right? And if that flywheel comes to a stop, it's hard to keep it going, or get that flywheel turning again. Keep that flywheel going with that personal joy, finding the fun, finding your niche, finding what really drives you to get to your layout or start building your layout, or whatever the case is that you enjoy in this hobby. Keep that flywheel turning with that personal joy.
Because it's not about impressing others. I mean, certainly it feels really good when, somebody oohs and ahs over a picture you posted. I mean, there is definitely a level of personal satisfaction there. But the personal part of it is about fulfilling your own creative desire and finding the joy in your own layout and connecting with your layout on a deeper level. I find that it probably keeps me more engaged with my layout, creating this little tiny scene, because I don't necessarily get motivated to go downstairs and speed match locomotives. Like, that's not the part of the hobby that's going to get me to go downstairs. I kind of have to do it, or there's going to be a tug of war every time I go to run something. But making that little cool detailed scene is more likely than not going to get me downstairs, or since I haven't been downstairs in 4 years, more specifically, into the studio to work on my module. Oh, we could have a whole show about why model railroaders should not become model railroad manufacturers, but that's
or podcasters, or there's a whole list of the hobby within the hobby stuff that that will definitely make you it takes away that hobby time. Still a lot of fun, but for sure.
But it's such a deeply personal aspect of model railroading that I find it's the thing that I can get excited about. If I've come up with a new, like tonight, for example, I'll probably end up putting it online soon, but I created little head walls. I don't know if you know what a head wall is. A head wall, because I just looked it up. I know what it is. I just can't describe it. Is a wall at the end of a drainage pipe or culvert, a steep slope forming at the head of a valley or at the wall at the end of a pipe. So it's basically, it's the formed concrete drainage outlet at a pipe, and it usually has railings around it.
Okay.
So you've seen it, the drainage ditches. Yeah. So I just created a head wall, and, I 3D modeled it and I painted it up, and I thought, that's fine, but it doesn't really do anything. So I was late to come home, but I said, forget it. I'm just going to be later. And I stayed at the studio for an extra 15, 20 minutes, and I incorporated the head wall into my module. And that was fun. It was fun to take, a 3D printed piece, which, was wonderful, but then to actually spend that 15 or 20 minutes and put it into the scenery to have it fulfill the function that it really should fulfill. So I now have a drainage ditch on my module with this little 3D printed head wall. That was great. It was a 15-minute diversion, and I worked on the module for 15 minutes, and I had absolutely no intention of doing so. And you just add a little detail, and it was a fun 15 minutes. So details are a gateway drug to modeling. That's going to be my
But it's those moments, though, you talked about earlier. Speed matching isn't your thing, but this is. But knowing that this is keeping that flywheel turning for those moments you have to do the things in the hobby that you don't necessarily love. You like the hobby, you love the hobby, and there's some chores that have to be done. But that helps keep that flywheel driving because it's going to get back to having that fun and enjoyment to it.
Exactly. And I do love this notion of, it's so easy to get distracted. And I do love the notion that everyone talks about, whether it's 15 minutes a day or 15 minutes a week, or, just so much time can go by without hands on the model, hands on the layout, that popping a little detail in, or just creating a little vignette or a scene, or you're going down the rabbit hole, a slide, a dragon, a dumpster, whatever it might be.
One of those little details that starts to fascinate you, and then you got to incorporate it, and pretty soon you're learning everything, or maybe more than you ever wanted to know about said detail. And then now you're incorporating it, and it's helping tell your story like we're trying to do with our layouts.
And at the end of the day, you might even learn what a head wall is. So,
That's right. That's absolutely. Nothing like a little education on things you never thought you'd know about. So
down the rabbit hole yet again.
Absolutely. Well, we went down the rabbit hole with all these. We're talking about super detailing. It was a lot of fun to think about this. And now we want to hear what our listeners have to say about super detailing and details on their layout. We asked the question of the month. Besides locomotives and rolling stock, what is your favorite detail on your layout? We got 6 different answers and maybe a couple different interpretations of that questions and their answers. We're going to go ahead and listen to those. And we're going to start with Austin Ogden.
Hey, Ray. It's Austin from Ogden Locomotive Works. My favorite thing to model besides a locomotive or a freight car on my layout is volunteer fire station. I was a firefighter for 8 years and wanted to really incorporate something like that on my layout just because it's always been a part of me.
Yeah, well, there you go. I mean, telling his personal story within his layout.
That's absolutely bang on for what we've been talking about.
Absolutely. All right, let's head over to Australia and Darren Johns.
G'day, this is Darren Johns from South Australia, Australia. So, question of the month, besides locomotives or rolling stock, what is your favourite detail on your layout? I would have to say that it's probably hard to narrow it down to just one detail because I believe there's many individual details that form a scene. So what I mean by that is some great signage, some animation with Arduino and that type of thing, light posts, right down to details with telegraph poles and utility poles. I think that all add to a scene and the detail of the scene. I just love getting into the weeds regarding this fine ultra detail in layouts.
Down the rabbit hole and into the weeds.
Yeah, and making it believable. I love the telegraph poles. You can really go down the rabbit hole with telegraph poles.
Oh yeah, different types, different heads, different. Yeah, there's just what utilities are on them. Yeah, there's just a world of different things.
The insulators, the Pele, the brilliant modeler from Denmark, Pele does some of the most realistic telegraph electrical poles and transformers I've ever seen.
Excellent. Well, I'll keep it in Australia and another familiar voice here on Around the Layout podcast.
My name is Paul Casser and I'm from Sydney, Australia. So the answer to the question of the month, I have two. I have a memorial garden that basically represents military because on my trips to the USA, I learned how military is honoured, how returned soldiers are honoured. So, and Australia's got a very rich history as well. So in honour of that, I created a memorial garden which has a lone soldier and a USA flag. So that's one key detail that I installed on the layout. The second one is it's actually from Mini Prints, is a trailer, which I've done a bit of a trailer yard with a lot of junk, which represents, I guess, some of the back areas of USA. And I've added a lot of detail there. So it's super detailed with old car parts. I think I've got a boat that has missing panels on it, clothesline, an old above ground swimming pool that has grass in it now, wrecked cars.
And that's where my executive producer got cut off. So this is why Paul's the executive producer and I do the on-air stuff, because Paul's message got cut off for some reason, but nonetheless, he's got a great scene. And I pick on him about that scene because I say, that's not what the entire United States looks like. I said, there may be some parts, but Paul's got that great scene kind of telling a whole bunch of story and a lot of fun to dive into all those details.
And it's personal for him. It's what he remembers or what he saw on his trip or what he chooses to commemorate on his layout. And thanks for the shout out there. I've seen pictures. I believe that the soldier monument is also from Mini Prints. And Paul has posted those on the Mini Prints Modelers Facebook group. So I love when people share pictures of what they're working on. It's fun to see.
Absolutely. Paul's a great modeler and has done a great job with that. And now let's head over to Switzerland.
Hi, Ray. This is Robin Felder from Switzerland, builder and owner of the Jackie Wheel switching layout. This time I found it pretty difficult to find that one answer. What my favorite thing is on my layout besides the rolling stock and the locomotives. I think I would go with the tracks themselves because first I thought about scenery because the scenery tells you where everything happens. And then I thought about the industries, the buildings, which allows you to make the storytelling, which industries allow for what commodities to be transported. However, after all, I think I will go with track arrangement because even if you only have like a track arrangement without any ballast on it, it still already allows you to make switching, to plan forward, to visualize what you're going to be building next and what plans do you have for what industries. So I would go with the tracks themselves because after cars and locomotives, the tracks are the next thing that allow you to enjoy the hobby, to run some trains, to make further planning and visualizing about the future of your layout. So I think I will definitely go with track arrangement as one thing. And then as a second thing, I think I will go with the scenery. And the third one would be the industries themselves. Thank you and have a good time. Bye-bye.
I think Robin covered quite a few things, and track is not only just a necessity, it is a detail and it is part of scenery.
And you can super detail track too with tie plates, with joint bars, with bunny rabbits. I was at a overpass looking down at a 4-track main line, an area 3-track or 4-track, 4-track, I think, an area called Bayview Junction near me, where there's VIA, CN, and GO train traffic. And embedded deep below, in the middle between two ties, was a skeleton of something that had been hit and died years and years ago. It was like an emaciated, like skeleton of a raccoon or a deer or something like that. So you can add a lot of details to track. Trash, you go look at tracks. It's not just 2 strips of clean steel ribbon. There's a lot of stuff, lots of stuff blows around tracks, and there's a lot of scenic details, line side details that you can use to super detail your track.
Yeah, rarely, if ever, will you see any bit of railroad property that's clean and pristine. It's exactly.
You're going to get pylons, you're going to get plastic, clothing, all sorts of things tend to be
debris off of cars, all 9 yards.
Tie bars, all sorts of stuff.
All right, let's head just over to the Hudson River here.
Hey, y'all, my name is Dennis Colucci from Wappingers Falls, New York. And the favorite detail that I have on my layout is something which actually hasn't quite made it off the workbench to the layout yet, but it will very shortly. And that is an N-scale ACI car track scanner. So the ACI car track system was the AAR standard between the late 1960s and the late 1970s. And since I model the mid 70s to the mid 80s, there are bound to be some of those scanners still around. So I decided to build one out of styrene. So it's basically a little optical scanner that would sit along the side of the tracks and scan the barcodes on the sides of the rail cars to help make that process a little easier. So I've built one out of styrene and N-scale. Just needs a coat of paint and then some light weathering, and then it can finally wind up on the layout and be that favorite detail. So thanks so much for the show, Ray, and can't wait to hear more.
Well, going from track to trackside details.
There you go. Perfect. Heaters, switch stands, switch machines, cabinets, relay cabinets. It's endless. It really is endless.
And then we got a different interpretation from our good friend Ken Zeska.
Hooray. Hey, the detail that I like most on my layout is really the fact that it's evolved through all the input from my friends and fellow model railroaders to become something that I can share with them and have a good community social time operating or just watching trains run. So that's all I got for you. Thanks. Bye.
Well, Ken kind of providing that last thought of being able to share all of what you've created with all the folks that you get to share this awesome hobby with.
And I can put a spin on that if you want.
Yeah, spin it.
Well, I have a little Ray on my layout.
You do?
Yeah. So with all of the mini prints, mini-me 3D scans, I'm starting to see people incorporate their friends and their operators onto their layouts in N scale or HO scale or S scale or O scale. So you can actually literally do what he was talking about there, literally and figuratively. I've seen, the front of the Colorado Model Railroad Museum calendar this year is a wonderful collection of model railroaders. So Michelle's on the cover, Dave Cruzwick is on the cover, maybe Jason Jensen. So yeah, you can actually share your layout. If you want George Celios or Ray Arnott or even Dr. Mini on your layout, you can do that.
And speaking of George Celios, I want to close out with that. I want to know what happens to Bernard Hellen when he walks in and sees the Franklin in South Manchester. Tell us a little bit about getting to see that amazing layout just outside of Boston, Massachusetts.
Well, I've been 3 times, and it won't be my last. It's a type of thing. When you go there, there's always somebody who, you'll see in their eyes will be the size of saucers, and you'll know it's their first time, and then you'll turn to the person beside you and you'll say, it's my third. And they'll say, oh, I've been coming here since 1984. It's my 12th time or my 18th time or my 23rd time. So it's It's an experience. It is an experience that is impossible to describe, and it's impossible to take in once. Every time you go, you will see different things. I joke, you could do a coffee table book on the diners of the Franklin and South Manchester, or, the rolling stock, or the industries, or it is museum quality. There are some that call it too much and too cluttered. I'm not of that opinion. I love it. It is more than you could ever view. It's one of those layouts where I love taking pictures and there's a fantastic, actually, Dave Cruzwick, who I mentioned earlier, moderates a fantastic Franklin and South Manchester Facebook group that has tons and tons of photographs. And you'll look at photographs of scenes you've actually seen. And every time you look at the photograph, tying in with our earlier conversation, you'll see something new and something clever and something fun. You'll look at George is very good at the tops of buildings. He has lots of details on rooftops, but it could be a building of, a dog or someone hanging out there washing, or, just really clever, imaginative. I mean, all the things we talked about, the storytelling, the believability, the connection to the audience, the creativity, the skill and modeling challenge, the realism, the satisfaction, everything that we just talked about is perfectly embodied, in that layout. And certainly, if you want to talk about the poster child for super detailing, it is the Franklin and South Manchester.
Well, we're big advocates here on Around the Layout podcast of going to see as many layouts as you can, especially if you're in the planning or even in the current building stage, or any opportunity you have to go see another layout, you should go do it. And the Franklin and South Manchester is one of those layouts. You should go see it at least once, but you probably are going to need at least a dozen times, like Bernard has mentioned. You can always get something from it, even if you're not going to ever plan to do a quarter of the super detailing that George has. You can still learn quite a bit from it.
I don't think any human being could achieve
right. Yeah.
Something like that. Like, I think that's a superhuman. My understanding is that there was a period of time every year where George just closed down his business and worked on the layout. So, I mean, I can't imagine the number of person hours that are in that. And I do hope that it will be, that's a layout that needs to be saved and put in a museum, because I think, you hear about these iconic, layouts from the 50s, 60s, 70s, the Gorian defeateds and the sort of iconic, layouts that basically, the pioneers of the industry, the penultimate sort of layouts that sort of made the world what it is in model railroading. I would include the Franklin and South Manchester in that Mount Rushmore, that listing of the greats.
Absolutely. It's a great layout, and certainly one, if you find yourself in the Boston metro area, make plans to get over there and see it.
Yeah, George does one open house pretty much every month.
And we'll share information on how to find out about all of that on our website, aroundthelayout.com/153.
And to answer your question, my head exploded. So, and continues to explode. Every time I go and see that layout, it is absolutely sensory overload for me.
So if somebody's looking to get into doing super detailing, we've mentioned you are the owner, founder, and master everything, Dr. Mini himself at Mini Prints. Tell us a little bit about Mini Prints and where people can find more on that.
Miniprints.com. I am always adding things. I'm always interested in what people would like to see. So I can't guarantee that it will be made. Not everything can be made due to time, but I'm always interested in requests. Recently, I've added basketball hoops for March Madness. That was a request. I have a Mini Prints of the Month club that goes out every month in HO scale. And this last month, everything in the box was a request. So requests and ideas are greatly appreciated. A lot of what you will see on Mini Prints are because people asked for it. We haven't talked about the origin story because everyone's probably sick to death and have heard it. But this whole crazy thing happened by mistake because I wanted an HO scale beaver for my own layout. And back in the day, one did not exist. They existed in O scale. but no one had thought to make one in HO. So the rest is history. And somehow in 5 years, I've gone from HO scale beavers for my own layout to learning what a head wall is. So it's been quite a journey. Miniprints.com. If your listeners would like to place an order and if they'd like to use the code ATLP, use that code. And why don't I throw in a little ray with every order?
That sounds awesome. I'd love to be able to rail fan a whole bunch of layouts in miniature. It's a lot of fun to be able to see folks doing that. I saw one picture recently. I was put between the gauge, which is a little scary, but
were you horizontal or vertical?
I was horizontal. At least maybe I could run, but yeah, which I don't run very much, but yeah, that'd be awesome. So yeah, definitely check that out with the code ATLP at miniprints.com. And of course, we'll share a link on our website aroundthelayout.com/153.
And why don't we do that until, what do you think, the end of the month?
Yeah. So that'll be good until the end of business day on March 31st. So get your order in on miniprints.com. Get yourself a mini ray equipped with my summer hat and camera ready to take photos of all the super details on your layouts. Okay, to take advantage of this awesome opportunity from miniprints.com, here's what you got to do in this order. Go to miniprints.com, select any item that you want to purchase, then add me to your cart. Under the mini means, look for Ray ATLP, and then use code ATLP when you check out, and that will give you the mini ray for free. And now back to the show.
And then if you do incorporate a little ray on your layout in a scene, take a picture, share it on the Mini Prints Modelers group on Facebook, because I'd love to see all the fantastic, creative, super detailing scenes that people do with their little rays. Let's keep it tasteful, but
please, yes.
Please. But that'll be fun. It's a little sort of fun challenge. We'll throw it out there, and I'm happy to include that, and we'll see what people do with their little mini me rays.
Awesome stuff, Bernard. Want to thank you so much for coming on Around the Layout and telling us all about diving down that rabbit hole.
Thanks so much for having me, and have fun. That's the end of the day. Just do what you like doing and have fun doing it.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Around the Layout. Learn more about today's episode, check out past shows, and much more on our website, aroundthelayout.com. Show your support by becoming an operating crew member at aroundthelayout.com/crew. Follow us on social media, aroundthelayout.com/social. And send us your feedback, aroundthelayout@gmail.com. Thanks for hanging out with us Around the Layout.
Is anyone on the internet? Uh-oh.